Open the OTA main view and sign into Azure. Select Azure and click the Sign In button. Enter your subscription ID and click the Register Application button. An application will be created with the name that you set in the application name field with the corresponding client ID, client secret, and tenant ID automatically generated. Click the Sign In button once the application is generated. Click the Create New button to create all required resources. The IoT Hub, storage, and updater for the IoT Hub will be automatically generated in Azure. Click the Select Projects menu, and follow the guide to create an ADU sample project. In the Azure_demo project, change the target device and section settings following readme.md. Create a secure bootloader sample project using the same guide in the Select Projects menu. Change the target device and section settings in the Azure_boot project following readme.md. Reopen the OTA main view, and select the Azure_boot and Azure_demo projects as the bootloader and firmware, respectively. Open the OTA Manage IoT Device view. Create an IoT device in Azure. Enter an IoT device name and then click the Create button. To write to the device, create initial firmware. Add an IoT device, set version, and then click the Create Initial Firmware button. A code signing certificate is required when creating initial firmware for the first time. Fill in the required information for the code signing certificate and click the OK button. The created initial firmware will be saved in the QEOTA folder of the Azure_demo project. Write the initial firmware to RX65N and start debugging. Select an IoT device and then click the Debug button. Write the initial firmware to the board. Confirm the RFP settings and click the Write button. Click the Debug button to start debugging the initial firmware. Select the Firmware Log tab, set the COM port connected to the evaluation board, and then click the Connect button. Logs will be displayed when you run the program. Create updated firmware to execute OTA. Add an IoT device, set version, and click the Create Update Firmware button. The created updated firmware will be saved in the QEOTA folder of the Azure_demo project. Execute OTA. Add an IoT device, select version, and click the Execute OTA button. The firmware update will begin when the IoT device receives an update notification from Azure. Check the firmware log to confirm the firmware operation. After the download is complete, the firmware will be verified. If there are no problems, the IoT device will restart, and the updated firmware will start operating. Select the OTA tab and confirm that the OTA job has been completed in Azure.